Welcome to Left Africa.
I want you to imagine just a really jarring historical contradiction for a second.
Okay.
Put yourself in this scenario. How does a charismatic 42-year-old leader win a Nobel Peace Prize for promising democratic reform, only to end up running the exact same, single-party shell game as the dictatorship he replaced?
Yeah, it really sounds like the plot of some dystopian political thriller.
Right. But this isn't fiction. I mean, this is the reality of Ethiopia's political landscape right now.
And the trajectory we're looking at is, well, it's one of the most remarkable and, frankly, devastating political pivots of the 21st century.
Yeah.
Grasping how that pivot actually happened requires looking past the standard election headlines.
Yeah.
And really digging into the actual machinery of the state.
Which is exactly our mission today. We are taking a deep dive into the June 22nd, 2026 Ethiopian election results, because we want to understand exactly how this massive promise of democracy just unraveled so spectacularly.
Sure.
To do this, we're drawing from a really detailed investigative dossier from leftafrica.org. It's titled Ethiopia's 97% Landslide, The Promise That Died in a Ballot Box. And we're also bringing in corroborating reporting from major international outlets like DW, Al Jazeera, Reuters, and the BBC.
But, before we go any further, I really need to make something exceptionally clear to you as a listener.
Yeah, this is important.
The sources we're synthesizing today contain highly critical, politically charged analysis of the Ethiopian government, along with some really blistering critiques of various international actors.
Mm-hmm.
We are not taking sides here. We're not validating or endorsing these viewpoints as absolute objective truth.
Right.
Our sole goal is to impartially report on the claims, the data, and the specific arguments contained in this source material, just so that you can grasp the full picture of what these analysts are saying.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the sheer magnitude of the June 2026 election, we really have to go back to the baseline of 2018.
We do, yeah.
The contrast between the soaring hope of that specific moment and the stark reality of today that forms the entire foundation of the reporting we're looking at.
Exactly. I mean, think about what the country looked like in 2018.
It was a very different vibe.
Totally. When Abiy Ahmed came to power, he was stepping into a system built by a coalition known as the EPRDF, that's the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front.
Okay.
And the EPRDF didn't just govern, right? They completely suffocated the political space. They had this infamous reputation for routinely winning elections with a, quite frankly, laughable 99.6% of the vote.
I mean, you hear a number like 99.6%, and it's obviously a punchline.
Yeah.
But mechanically, how does a ruling party even manufacture a number like that? How do you pull that off?
Well, they did it through total societal surveillance.
Wow.
Yeah. The EPRDF utilized this system known as the 1-to-5 network. Essentially, one loyal party member was assigned to actively monitor 5 households.
Wait, really? Just assigned to watch their neighbors?
Literally watching their neighbors.
Yep.
And the party controlled access to seeds, fertilizers, basic government services. So, that 99.6% wasn't a measurement of popularity. It was a measurement of coercion. It was a threat.
Yeah.
It told the average citizen, hey, we see you, and opposition is futile.
And that context is exactly why Abiy's arrival in 2018 felt like an earthquake.
Oh, for sure.
He promised a clean break from that exact apparatus. He didn't just tweak the system. He formally dismantled the EPRDF entirely.
He did.
He stood in front of the public and actually apologized for decades of state violence. He released thousands of political prisoners, welcomed exiled opposition leaders back into the country.
Well, he even created a brand new political entity, the Prosperity Party.
Yeah.
And he championed this philosophy called Medemer, which translates roughly to unity or synergy.
Mm-hmm.
The optics were just masterfully handled. The message to the citizens and to the world was that the dark days of single-party theater were permanently over.
But then, we fast forward to June 22nd, 2026. The National Electoral Board of Ethiopia announces the results. Abiy's Prosperity Party secures a staggering landslide, taking approximately 90% or more of the parliamentary seats. The opposition is fundamentally non-existent.
What's fascinating here is the systemic continuity.
Yeah.
The core argument in that Left Africa dossier is that Abiy didn't just win an election. He systematically reconstructed the exact electoral machinery he was initially elected to dismantle.
It's wild.
He proved that in Ethiopia, the underlying authoritarian system remains completely intact. The only thing that actually changes is, well, the face on the poster.
You know, when I was reading about this continuity, a specific analogy came to mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a city hiring this celebrated visionary architect to demolish a crumbling, oppressive, windowless building.
Okay.
And the architect does it. The people cheer as the walls come down. But then everyone watches in absolute horror as that same architect takes the exact same bricks from the exact same rubble and uses them to rebuild the identical windowless structure.
Wow.
They just slap a different name on the front door.
That's spot on. The Prosperity Building instead of the Revolutionary Building.
Right.
But the bricks are the exact same state resources, the same monopoly on security, and the same absolute control over the electoral board.
But getting from that genuine hope in 2018 and, let's remember, a literal Nobel Peace Prize in 2019.
Oh, the Nobel Prize.
Getting from that to an unopposed 90% landslide in 2026 requires way more than just clever politics.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you don't get 90% of the vote naturally in a country of 126 million people. You have to actively silence the opposition.
Yes.
And the mechanics of that silencing lead us directly into the Tigray War.
And this is where the narrative takes a really dark turn, shifting from just, political maneuvering to profound human tragedy.
Yeah.
In 2019, Abiy was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his deal ending a 20-year military stalemate with neighboring Eritrea. His accepted speech in Oslo was hailed globally as a masterclass in African democratic aspiration.
The international community essentially just handed him a halo.
Exactly. But by 2020, federal troops are deployed into the northern Tigray region. And the resulting 2020 to 2022 Tigray War escalates into one of the deadliest conflicts of the 21st century.
It's just horrifying. We are talking about estimates from the UN and Amnesty International putting the civilian death toll anywhere from 300,000 to 600,000 people.
It's an unfathomable number.
Organizations on the ground documented horrific mass atrocities, widespread famine being deliberately used as a weapon, and just severe human rights abuses.
The scale of the devastation in Tigray rivals some of the worst global conflicts in modern history. The democratic halo that was so carefully polished in Oslo was entirely shattered by the brutal reality on the ground.
But I have to play the skeptic here on behalf of everyone listening because the timeline is just baffling to me.
How so?
Well, wait. If up to 600,000 civilians are dying, and the United Nations is actively documenting mass atrocities, how does the international community not completely cut ties with this government right then and there? Was the Nobel Prize acting as a literal shield?
That is precisely the concept the dossier introduces. They literally call it the Nobel Shield.
Wow. Okay.
The argument is that winning the world's most prestigious peace prize provided Abiy with a bizarre, almost impenetrable moral immunity.
Huh.
Think about the massive cognitive dissonance for Western diplomats.
Oh, right.
The very same agencies and world leaders who had just flown to Oslo to celebrate his visionary peace efforts suddenly found themselves paralyzed. Admitting that their newly minted peace laureate was overseeing a brutal domestic war meant admitting their own catastrophic failure in judgment.
So they stayed quiet to save face. And that global passivity during the war gave his government the operational runway to quietly restructure the political environment for the 2026 election.
Which brings us to the aftermath. The act of fighting eventually ended with the Pretoria Peace Agreement in November 2022. But peace, in this specific context, is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
I can imagine.
Tigray didn't return to a state of democratic normalcy. The terms of the agreement meant the region began reintegrating under incredibly heavy federal military supervision.
Right.
The federal government fully reclaimed control of the security apparatus, which meant the environment for a free and fair regional election was entirely neutralized.
And the crackdown wasn't isolated to just Tigray.
Not at all.
In the years leading up to 2026, the surviving political opposition across the rest of the country was systematically dismantled. Leaders who could have mounted a genuine challenge were either exiled or severely restricted by the state.
Yeah, the legal framework itself was completely weaponized.
How did they do that?
Well, state of emergency decrees and anti-terrorism laws were heavily utilized to muzzle independent media. Civil society organizations, the groups that usually monitor elections or register voters, they were financially starved or legally gutted.
So there's no one watching the watchers.
Precisely. The entire electoral infrastructure was rebuilt by the ruling party, exclusively for the ruling party.
I just want you to imagine trying to cast a meaningful vote in that environment.
Yeah.
Your local independent newspaper has been shut down for years. The opposition candidate you might have actually supported has fled the country or is sitting in a jail cell on fabricated charges.
Bleak picture.
And the region that pushed back the hardest against the federal government is under military occupation. A 90% landslide isn't a surprise. It's a mathematical certainty.
Right.
It's literally the only outcome the controlled equation allows.
Which leads to the most uncomfortable question posed to the international community by these sources.
No.
If this election was so blatantly manufactured and the opposition was so obviously erased, why did the world barely react? Why aren't major democratic nations issuing blistering condemnations of a 90% sham election?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the answer has absolutely nothing to do with human rights or democratic values.
Nothing at all.
It is purely about brutal geopolitical pragmatism. It's about a completely different set of numbers. Ethiopia is an absolute demographic and economic powerhouse.
Yes.
You have a population of roughly 126 million people. That is the second largest in Africa. Economically, they're pushing a GDP growth rate of 6 to 7%.
Which makes it one of the fastest growing economies on the entire continent.
Exactly.
You cannot easily isolate a market and a workforce of that magnitude. It's essentially a gravitational force that pulls in foreign investment, regardless of domestic policy.
And then you add geography to that equation.
Oh, well, the geography is key.
Right. Just look at a map. Ethiopia sits squarely in the Horn of Africa. It's adjacent to the critical shipping lanes of the Red Sea, which carry a massive percentage of global trade.
And it controls the headwaters of the Blue Nile.
Yes, which gives it immense leverage over downstream nations like Egypt. From a strategic standpoint, Ethiopia is irreplaceable real estate.
And that real estate dictates the foreign policy of every major global player. The sources break down these competing interests perfectly.
Yeah, let's go through them.
Take the United States, for instance. The U.S. views Ethiopia as an absolutely critical anchor for its counterterrorism operations in the Horn of Africa, particularly concerning al-Shabaab in neighboring Somalia. Washington needs a strong centralized partner in Addis Ababa to maintain regional security.
Right.
And they're willing to overlook exactly how that partner manages its ballot boxes just to ensure that security cooperation continues uninterrupted.
Meanwhile, China has a completely different but equally powerful vested interest. They aren't worried about counterterrorism in the same way. They are focused on infrastructure and massive economic expansion.
Billions of dollars.
China has poured billions into Ethiopia. They funded and built the Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway, which is this crucial logistics artery. They've constructed massive industrial parks.
And Beijing's foreign policy traditionally prioritizes stability and state-led economic partnership over, domestic democratic metrics.
So a strongman who guarantees their investments is a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. And then you factor in the European Union.
Right, the EU.
For the EU, the primary lens for engagement in Africa right now is migration control.
Yeah.
They desperately rely on Ethiopia to act as a stabilizing force and a gatekeeper. They need a partner in managing and absorbing the flow of migrants who might otherwise attempt the dangerous journey toward Europe.
So if you look at the board, the United States needs a bouncer for regional security.
Yes.
China needs a reliable business partner for its massive infrastructure loans. And the European Union needs a gatekeeper to hold back migration. Every single global superpower has a vested interest in looking the exact same way away from the ballot box.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the most searing argument presented in the analysis.
Yeah.
The international community only actually cares about election integrity when there is no overriding strategic interest at stake.
Wow.
When a nation of 126 million people, positioned in one of the most vital geopolitical choke points on Earth, holds a sham election, the global response is calculated silence.
It's chilling.
The contradiction of this 90% landslide doesn't just belong to Abiy Ahmed. The entire world is complicit in maintaining the mirage.
It's a sobering realization. And, leftafrica.org takes this concept even further. They zoom out from the Horn of Africa entirely and argue that this dynamic isn't just an isolated Ethiopian tragedy.
No.
They view this as a continental blueprint.
Yeah, the dossier frames these events within a much broader Pan-African context. They argue that manufactured landslide mandates or highly contested third-term maneuvers, they aren't malfunctions of African democracy.
You're right.
They're calculated mechanisms. They're explicitly designed to produce the kind of strongman winners that both the West and the East can comfortably do business with. Global powers prize stability and predictability far more than true, messy, democratic representation.
In the context of Ethiopia specifically, the sources refer to this as the continuity myth. The illusion was the belief that Abiy was ever going to break the wheel of authoritarianism. Because if you trace the history, every single Ethiopian leader going back to Emperor Haile Selassie, through the communist Derg regime, through the EPRDF, they have all utilized the vast apparatus of the state to manufacture electoral consent. The state has always tightly controlled the narrative, the resources, and ultimately the outcome.
And the tragedy of Abiy's tenure, as framed by these journalists, isn't that he tried and failed to break the system. It's that he simply became the latest, highly efficient manager of it. He utilized the modern tools of public relations and the immense prestige of a Nobel Prize to mask the exact same historical authoritarianism that defined his predecessors.
So what does this all mean? The sources force us to confront an incredibly dark question here.
They do.
Was the 2018 to 2019 reformist phase ever genuine? Was there ever an actual moment where a multi-party democracy was the goal? Or was the whole reformist era just a brilliantly calculated survival strategy?
Right.
A way to consolidate absolute power, secure international funding, and basically eliminate rivals before showing his true hand.
It forces a complete reevaluation of his entire rise to power. Just look at the sequence of events without the lens of optimism.
Okay.
He dismantles the old party structure to remove internal rivals. He secures international goodwill and massive financial support by playing the reformer.
Right.
He neutralizes the most significant foreign threat by signing a peace deal with Eritrea. And once those pieces are securely in place, he systematically crushes domestic opposition.
Yeah, when you lay it out like that.
It doesn't look like a reformer who lost his way. That looks like a leader who calculated exactly how much repression the international community would tolerate and engineered his consolidation of power accordingly. He didn't break the system, he mastered it.
He found the exact limit of what the world would accept and realized the global community had no teeth when it came to their democratic demands.
Precisely.
To summarize the journey the source material has taken us on today, we started with the genuine, palpable hope of a young reformer winning a Nobel Peace Prize. We tracked how that reformist halo provided cover during a devastating war in Tigray, resulting in hundreds of thousands of deaths. And we've arrived at a 90% manufactured landslide, facilitated by the strategic silence of a totally complicit global community.
And the reason this matters to you, the listener, goes far beyond the borders of Ethiopia. This is a real-time masterclass in how easily democratic ideals are crushed by the immense weight of geopolitical pragmatism. It exposes the bare mechanics of global power, demonstrating how strategic access and regional stability will almost always be prioritized over the fundamental rights of citizens to freely choose their leaders.
It's a heavy realization, but understanding the mechanisms behind the headlines is crucial.
It is.
And we want to leave you with one final thought from the source material, something you definitely won't find in any official election broadcast.
This raises an important question, perfectly encapsulated by a BBC headline the dossier highlights. The headline simply reads, "Fears grow of renewed conflict." The ballots have been counted, but the underlying systemic tensions are completely unresolved. If the international community continues to reward sham elections with silence simply to maintain their own strategic stability, what ultimate message does that send? Will marginalized regions like Tigray or other communities who have been systematically locked out of the political process conclude that armed rebellion, and not the ballot box, is their absolute only remaining path to having a political voice?
Because if the architect insists on rebuilding the exact same windowless prison, eventually the people trapped inside are going to stop asking for a key and they're going to start looking for a sledgehammer.
Wow, yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. It's a complex, challenging topic, but unpacking these realities is what makes us truly well-informed.
Thank you for listening and for being willing to engage with these difficult, complex questions.
Until next time, stay insanely curious.